The good news, they're definitely not aliens.
There is no indication of aliens or extraterrestrial activity.
The bad news that the Chinese or some other hostile power might well know a lot more about us than we think.
These surveillance balloons have crossed over dozens of countries on multiple continents around the world, including some of our closest allies and partners.
So if it isn't aliens from outer space, who on earth sent them? How many are there? How long have they been flying over the West? And for what purpose exactly? Dan and Rohit will try to work all that out tonight. Also on News at 10. New pictures show the terrifying power of the quake and the absolute priority of hospital workers in a paediatric ward. Get the children, then run. Horrific scenes that could have led to deaths. UEFA issues a report that roundly damns both itself and the French police for the chaos that engulfed fans at last year's Champions League final. NATO warns the spring offensive has begun in Ukraine, and a trailblazer, an innovator, and now a fellow of the British Film Institute, the one and only Spike Lee.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. When the US military shot down what it claimed to be a Chinese spy balloon high in American airspace just over a week ago, it had all the makings of a full-blown diplomatic incident. But after a weekend in which 3 more objects were shot out of the skies by the US Air Force, many people have started to wonder what exactly was going on. Is there intelligent life somewhere out there after all? Well, the good news, it's not aliens. At least, that's probably good news. Tonight, a White House briefing said it had been determined that China does indeed have a balloon surveillance program. It added that the latest objects intercepted over Alaska, Michigan, and just across the Canadian border were not crewed and did not seem to pose a direct threat, but were shot down as a precaution. As yet, though, they remain unidentified and many of the questions they pose unanswered.
Does this video show the moment US military jets scrambled to another unidentified object over Lake Huron yesterday? US officials have confirmed a 4th incident in the area, with speculation now in overdrive as to what's going on.
4 shoot-downs in about a week.
We are not flying balloons over China.
I don't think we're being invaded by Mars. Let's just
Okay, good to know.
The ongoing mystery has dominated US news coverage.
Hey, shot, it's going at it right now.
More than a week after an alleged Chinese surveillance balloon was shot down off South Carolina.
It's hit.
That's my Air Force right there, buddy.
The FBI is examining the debris in an evidence room. The US Defense Secretary confirming the other objects haven't yet been retrieved.
Because the recovery efforts are unique, the timelines will be unique as well. I want to be clear, the 3 objects taken down this weekend are very different from what we were talking about last week. We knew exactly what that was, a PRC surveillance balloon.
So far, 4 unidentified objects have been shot down over North American airspace in the span of 8 days. The first, a suspected Chinese spy balloon, was downed on the 4th of February off the coast of South Carolina. Less than a week later, another much smaller flying object was hit off the remote northern coast of Alaska. The next day, a third, this time in Canadian airspace over the northern Yukon Territory, and the latest object was taken out yesterday over Lake Huron on the US-Canadian border. Those who used to oversee North America's defences think it might be part of a Chinese effort to test US systems and reactions.
It's bigger than just this specific reaction. Balloons over top of one place while they're embedded in our cyber networks to be able to look and see everything about that reaction will tell them very much about our command and control and how effective it is.
Today, the Chinese government accused the US of using covert balloons to spy on its territory 10 times, saying America should reflect on itself rather than smear others. But the claim and counterclaim have got some wondering whether US cockpit videos like this A proof the Chinese have been probing the defences of America for years. An official report last month showed US military pilots have logged an alarming number of unidentified aerial phenomena. Today, the White House felt obliged to clarify the latest incidents were not regarded as extraterrestrial.
There is no indication of aliens or extraterrestrial activity with these recent takedowns.
It begs the question, if aliens are discounted, how long has this Chinese surveillance program been involved in close encounters with America's most sensitive military assets? Dan Rivers, News at 10, Washington.
And Rohit is here to talk about all this. At one stage today, I did think I was actually going to be asking you about aliens, but we seem to have got past that tonight. But as Dan was saying there, I mean, like, how long's this been going on? How serious a problem is it? What's this all about?
Well, it's really serious, and it was strange to see the tone there of the White House spokeswoman, because she made a joke of it. She talked about extraterrestrials, aliens, sci-fi movies, but this is not a joke. This is much bigger than a balloon. You know, what we have here is the entire Biden administration's strategy in terms of dealing with China, which in its words are cooperate, compete, confront. This has been reduced to just one of those three, confront. They're in a real bind here. Perhaps there's an upside for the US administration in that finally they've been able to rally international support. They've been able to win over public opinion at home as well against what it has identified as its key strategic issue. You know, there are many more mentions of China than Russia in the State of the Union address the other day. And he's won support from many allies as well, which are really bystanders here. They have no way of influencing anything that's happening here. What's really worrying, though, is the lack of communication, because the real concern will always be the potential for accidental escalation. The Americans say they put calls out to the Chinese, which were not answered. There are comparisons with the Cold War here, of course. We're not at that stage in one sense, but we are in another, because these, unlike the US and the USSR, are entwined economies. And so the implications here are incredibly serious. And what happens next? Well, everyone's looking at the Munich Security Conference, this big meeting in Germany later in the week, where there are senior US, senior Chinese officials due to meet there. And that's a crossroads moment, and how both sides respond there may well dictate whether this crisis escalates or whether it subsides.
Well, it's kind of fascinating, Rohit. Thank you very much indeed. Well, we're 1 week on now from when the earthquake in Turkey and Syria hit, and it's getting more and more difficult to take in the sheer scale of the disaster unfolding day by day. Many thousands more may lie dead beneath the rubble than the 37,000 victims already counted. And shocking footage emerged today of the exact moments that the earthquake struck, with people running for their lives as whole towns and cities were razed to the ground. Now, despite occasional miracles, the hopes of rescuers that more survivors might still be found are rapidly diminishing, and all that's left are shock, grief, and growing anger.
It is a week since Turkey's tragedy began. Newly released footage shows the moment that life here changed. As the earthquake hits, power lines spark. Dust clouds fill the empty streets as buildings fall on those sleeping within them. 10 minutes after the quake begins, people are rushing from their homes, the ground still moving beneath them. A few have grabbed blankets, but they can't outrun nature as city after city falls. After 7 days, this man shouts in fury and desperation for someone to free his dead mother. Others are being released from the rubble, and incredibly, some are still alive. This rescue team crawled into the wreckage to find Naide Ume. She'd been trapped for 174 hours. The challenge for the rescue teams is immense. People were in all of these buildings, and many have not yet been searched. Little wonder this death toll is predicted to rise significantly in the coming days. That challenge is shared across the border in Syria, where the damage of a decade of war is dwarfed by the damage done in minutes by the quake. Here, without any significant aid, they're left to do what they can. What use a spoon with ruins on this scale? This is tragedy and trauma compounded. All ages struggling to comprehend what's happened. In the hospitals, the beds are full of the most gravely injured. It's not yet clear whether their names will be added to the list of the living or the dead. The medical teams are now having to answer the hardest questions.
We cannot find any answers for their question. Where is my dad? Where is mom? Where is parents? Where are my relatives? Where is, for the children, where is my toys?
Such questions have come from children like Mohammed. He's lost his home and all his family and gained only the loneliness of loss. For so many orphaned children, what blessing is survival in the face of such tragedy? Khadija Hussein lost her son, daughter-in-law and grandchildren. Only 5-year-old Hadil survived. I can't look at this child, she says. She's lost her father, she's lost everyone. For years, this land was destroyed from above by acts of war. This destruction came from below and an act of nature. No enemy tore down their homes, but they are gone all the same. So too are thousands of lives. Nature has succeeded in destroying what war left behind, and the hopes of a population exhausted by generational crisis. Emma Murphy, News at 10, southern Turkey.
In northern Syria, the natural catastrophe of the earthquake is piling new horrors onto the man-made disaster of its recent civil war. It's that which has made getting aid in to where it's needed such a difficult task. Now, the pink areas you can see here are controlled by President Assad's Syrian government, but parts of the quake zone remain rebel-held. Light blue denotes the stronghold of Kurdish-led forces, and the orange area along the border in the northwest is controlled by various jihadist groups. So while Turkish-backed Syrian rebels are in the red areas of the north. After the nearly 12 years of civil war, Bab al-Hawa is the only border crossing authorised by the UN for aid delivery, severely limiting aid transport into rebel areas. The devastated city of Kahramanmaraş in Turkey has become the new front line in the battle against the developing humanitarian disaster. At the place which was the quake's epicentre, amid the catastrophe that's overtaken their lives, the best that people can hope for is the bare shelter of a tent.
It's been 1 week since millions of people in this region went to bed in a home just like this. The earthquake hit while they were sleeping and tore this place apart. Kahramanmaraş was the epicentre. In this city, homes have now become tombs. How many bodies are still buried beneath the rubble is unknown. I believe in my heart we can still find some people alive here, this rescuer tells me. We haven't lost hope. Those who survived the natural disaster now face a new humanitarian crisis. The earthquake hit an area almost the size of Great Britain. The sheer number of homeless is too much for makeshift camps to cope. This city had a population of just over 1 million. Tents filled up the sports stadium within days. Now they sprawl out into the car park and onto what used to be people's gardens.
This camp is getting bigger every day, but it's not expanding quickly enough. People like these Syrian refugees are still waiting to be given some kind of help, while others are spending cold nights sleeping on the streets.
15 Syrians cram in here for heat. They all fled the war at home, only to see their Turkish sanctuary cave in on them. We've applied to be given a tent 3 times since the earthquake, he tells me. We have young babies in here, but we were told there's just nothing left. Since losing their home, this family has been sleeping in a park. They've come to the city's field hospital trying to get help for their 3-year-old son.
My son is sick. He has a flu and now he has diarrhea.
After the earthquake, a lack of sanitation means sickness spreads quickly. But medicines here are in short supply.
For children, antibiotics is the big problem now, and some cancer problems here, medicines here, and
you're lacking in antibiotics for children and cancer medication.
Yes. We are seeing a lot of scabies. That's scabies, and we need scabies medicine too much now.
Another day of despair ends here, but that's when the cold starts to bite. The new homeless must huddle for heat. So much is bleak just now, and yet somehow life finds a way. Baby Malik was born in the camp 3 days ago. Her name means messenger of God. What will she say about how she was treated here? Peter Smith, News at 10, Kahramanmaraş.
Well, to carry on with Peter's theme there, as more devastating stories of loss and despair emerge, so too do tales of selfless heroism, showing the courage and humanity of many, even in the most difficult times. Security footage taken from this hospital in Gaziantep shows the moment staff felt the tremor and began to run for safety. But one nurse is seen putting her own life at stake when she bravely ran back to save children in the paediatric ward, carrying one in her arms and directing others to safety. And I've been speaking to Peter for the latest edition of our podcast, What You Need to Know, where he tells me about the situation in Turkey and in neighbouring Syria. It's a very compelling listen, and you can hear it whenever you get your podcast from. Back here, UEFA's own report was published tonight into the turmoil involving thousands of Liverpool fans denied entry into last year's Champions League final in Paris, and it could hardly have been more damning. UEFA itself bears primary responsibility for the horrific scenes, the report says, which could have resulted in the deaths of fans, and it rejects as false and reprehensible claims made by both UEFA and the French police that the chaos had been caused by large numbers of ticketless Liverpool fans.
It is supposed to be UEFA's showcase club event. Instead, these were the scenes at May's Champions League final in Paris. Today, a report found that UEFA's failings almost led to disaster.
So, as I'm coming through, you see that I'm getting dragged over the turnstile.
Mark Summer arrived at the Stade de France 3 hours before kick-off. This footage shows him 2 hours later being lifted over turnstiles.
And I was getting crushed from the front and from the back, so I was getting really squeezed. This woman was in front of me. Yeah, she just started like screaming out, like help, help, and things which was quite difficult to deal with.
And many others speak of similar experiences. Gerard Long is bringing legal action against UEFA on behalf of over 2,000 supporters.
UEFA's primary duty is fan safety. They completely failed. The entities failed to speak to each other. You know, it's amazing that people weren't actually killed.
And that's why you want answers from UEFA?
That's exactly why we want answers from UEFA, so this doesn't happen again.
Today, an independent panel reported that fans had significant issues accessing the venue that had not been properly risk assessed. French authorities are criticised for deflecting responsibility, and the report concludes that UEFA bears primary responsibility for the failures.
We all went to Paris in good faith.
Gareth O'Leary was at the match with his elderly parents who were both tear-gassed. Gareth is a Hillsborough survivor and says it is the lack of accountability that haunts him.
If you're going to create a shambles like this, just be transparent and honest about it. They'd said that the fans had turned up late. As we know, when people lie and refuse to take any accountability and victim blame, then they don't learn the lessons.
And there is further exasperation among supporters tonight. Many had been promised they would see the report before it was published. Instead, it appears to have been leaked. UEFA say they're analysing the findings, but for many the damage has already been done. Families left emotionally scarred from an event where their safety should have been guaranteed. Rachel Townsend, News at 10.
The family of a 16-year-old girl stabbed to death in a park today paid tribute to her strength and courage. Brianna Gay died after being found with stab wounds in Warrington yesterday afternoon. Her family described the transgender influencer as beautiful, witty and hilarious. 2 15-year-olds, a boy and a girl, are being held on suspicion of Brianna's tragic murder. Now, there's been a lot of speculation about Russia launching a spring offensive in Ukraine, but the stark reality tonight is that Russian attacks are already growing in intensity in the eastern Donbass area, a reality acknowledged today by NATO's Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg. This is the current state of the conflict in Ukraine, with Russian forces controlling the area highlighted in red. In recent days, there have been signs of a new offensive beginning to take shape, in particular around the city of Bakhmut, where Russian forces have been increasing their attacks, and further south in Vuhledar, where the cost in death and injury is significant on both sides.
The presence of drones above the battlefield gives an extraordinary view of the tank battles now raging in eastern Ukraine. Here, columns of Russian armoured vehicles taking cover behind a long row of trees as they prepare to attack the town of Vuhledar in the east. The damage inflicted by Ukrainian artillery can't be accurately assessed, but the pictures suggest it may have been considerable. And not just from artillery, anti-tank mines are taking their toll of Russian armour as they push incrementally eastwards. But the cost is so high, even Russian servicemen are circulating videos. It's the same all the way up this road, says the man filming this destroyed armoured column. Despite the losses they're inflicting, the Ukrainians are not winning in the east. Men like these fighting a rearguard action to hold on to the city of Bakhmut are suffering terribly. We will kill them all, he promises, but the reality is that Bakhmut could soon be in Russian hands. How serious would it be if Bakhmut is lost?
We just move back on these positions and continue to defend and continue to stop these attacks and these assaults of Russians.
But how strategic is that position?
No, I think that will not have a huge influence on our strategic positions in our defense on the east.
Away from the front lines, this war is increasingly turning into a contest of industrial production. This Russian footage aimed at recruiting people to work in the tank industry, as the country struggles to replace its mounting losses. But in the West too, NATO's Secretary-General warned today the war can't be won without significantly upping weapon production.
The war in Ukraine is consuming an enormous amount of ammunition and depleting Allied stockpiles. The current rate of Ukraine's ammunition expenditure is many times higher than our current rate of production.
Ukrainian crews were today being trained in Poland on the German-built Leopard 2 tanks that should be delivered as soon as next month. No one doubts the quality of the Western weapons that are being supplied to Ukraine, but there are questions about whether the quantity will be sufficient to give the Ukrainians a chance of victory. James Mates, News at 10, Kiev.
Now, it's an undeniable fact that black footballers play a huge role in the professional game in England, with stars like Marcus Rashford and Raheem Sterling becoming generational role models. So you might be forgiven for wondering why there are so few black football club managers. Patrick Vieira, who's in charge at Crystal Palace, is one rare exception, and when we spoke to him, his views on the matter had just as much bite as his fearsome presence as a player.
Patrick Vieira was Arsenal's invincible captain and a World Cup winner with his French teammates. But at Crystal Palace, he stands alone in the Premier League as the only black manager. He told me there's a lack of diversity across the football industry.
You know, when you're meeting the press, you're looking in the room and you're looking at how many black person that you have in the room. When I'm going to a meeting in the boardroom, you're looking at how many black people you have around.
A report from 2022 showed last season over 40% of players were from a black or ethnic minority background. And black people were 14% of qualified coaches. but they represent only 4% of managers across the Premier League and English Football League. Patrick says black coaches lack opportunities, not qualifications.
When you ask him the question, people are saying, yeah, but they are not doing their badges. And that is not true, because they are all going to do the badges from the Pro B license to the Pro license.
Black managers are struggling to find teams to coach across the continent. In Europe's top 5 leagues, of the 98 managers, only 3 are black.
What do you think the reason why is?
We shouldn't hide ourselves, say that racism is part of our game in our society. And then I think we need to go a little bit more deeper and try to understand why there is not, those opportunities has not been created to give to black managers as much as they have been given to white managers.
This weekend, for the second time this season, Brentford striker Ivan Toney was the victim of racist abuse online after scoring against Arsenal.
When it comes to the level of racism you faced as a player and discrimination you may have faced as a manager, do you think we're in a better place now, or are we going backwards?
We are in a better place, but it doesn't move quick enough, and the progression is not quick enough.
The Premier League say they have a series of schemes to improve diversity. Vieira believes black coaches lack the connections of white managers, but he still hopes to inspire players to seek a role in the dugout despite the challenges. Antoine Allen, News at 10.
A player for the Czech Republic today became the first current men's football international to come out as gay. Jakub Jankto said he was speaking out because he wanted to live his life in freedom, without prejudice and with love.
I'm homosexual and I no longer want to hide myself. I have a family.
His current club, Sparta Prague, said he has their full support.
I have a job.
Now, still on football, remember the little Scottish club, Darvel, who won a lot of hearts by beating the Giants of Aberdeen to reach the 5th round of the Scottish Cup? Well, sad to say, that dream died today. They were thrashed 5-1 at home by Falkirk, but the club said tonight they still have the unforgettable memories. Finally, throughout his illustrious career, the American film director Spike Lee has been a trailblazer and an innovator, particularly when bringing the stories of black people to the screen. Well, tonight, the British Film Institute made him a fellow, an honour the director said made him feel blessed.
Spike Lee's influence extends far beyond just the screen. For more than 30 years, the acclaimed filmmaker has told the stories of black lives, championed new talent, and challenged prejudice.
You see this here? This is who you are. Beautiful. Your beautiful black self.
He's probably best known for his 1992 Malcolm X biopic, starring Denzel Washington. Spike thinks we're in a much better place now when it comes to representation on screen.
In particular, much better here in the UK, because I remember numerous conversations with black Brits about how they were envious of African Americans, you know, as far as what we'd be able to do, and I don't get that conversation anymore, and I think that's a testament to the strides that have happened here in this country.
To the one, the only, Spike Lee.
Tonight he was honoured with a prestigious British Film Institute fellowship for his body of work. It all started in 1986 with She's Gotta Have It. Since then, Spike's directed and produced more than 30 films.
We must unite and organize to fight racism.
4 years ago, his movie Black Klansman won an Oscar. He's used his platform to comment on social injustice, police brutality, and diversity in the entertainment industry.
That's where the power is. A lot of instances, you know, behind the camera. I think it's a diverse approach to you know, to get more of the foothold in this industry, which historically has not been set up for people of color to prosper.
And
I'm still waiting for the first black James Bond. That's what I'm waiting for.
Spike says all his accolades aren't personal validation, but rather an acknowledgement of all the people who've helped him along the way. Rashid Abda, News at 10.
That's it. See you tomorrow. Good night. Thanks for watching.